Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Living the dream, Rob. How are
I,
you?
I'm good. Mike, you became famous not for your opera singing, which I know is just world famous, world renowned,
Thank you.
or your sales skills on QVC, but for a
Mm.
little show called Dirty Jobs. And you did so much for the skilled trades by showing the great work that ordinary Americans do every day. You shined a light on some of the most important, though overlooked jobs with enthusiasm and your famous humor. And then you parlayed that into a foundation where this year you gave out, what was it, over $1 million in scholarships.
Yep.
Mike, for those that may not be familiar with the skilled trade jobs, what are they and why are you such an advocate for them?
Well, I don't know that there's, an accepted, universal, agreed upon definition. To me, a skilled trades job is a job that primarily demands the mastery of a skill. So it's hard to talk about the jobs you're referring to without talking about education. It's all of a piece. But in a general way, skilled trades jobs don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. They require some kind of certification, some kind of mastery, some kind of expertise around a tangible skill. So my foundation spends a fair amount of time talking about educational alternatives to a traditional 4-year degree. We're uh, we're agnostic, we're bipartisan, at least to the extent you can be such a thing in this day and age. But I do weigh in from time to time on what I believe is the travesty of $1.6 trillion in outstanding student loans. The pre COVID skills gap was officially 7.3 million open jobs, the vast majority of which did not require a 4-year degree. And so, in a real general way, my foundation tries to make a more persuasive case for skilled trade jobs that exist today and challenge the overarching belief that the best path for the most people is a 4-year degree. So the most political thing you'll hear me say typically around the skilled trades is that we're lending money we don't have to kids who will never be able to pay it back to train them in many cases for jobs that don't exist anymore. Reconnecting the country to the existence of opportunity in a way that specifically empowers and engages kids who are willing to learn a skill that's in demand. That's the PR part of our foundation. Our scholarship uh, component, to your point, consists of a series of endless fundraisers. We take in usually over $1 million a year and give most of it away in the form of work ethic scholarships. So that's what we do. For a long time, we're in our 12th year now, started Labor Day 2008. And for a long time, I pushed the boulder up the hill as best I could by talking as persuasively as I could about these themes. But now uh, we're really excited. The work we've done with you with DCA and some other large companies has enabled us to circle back with our scholarship winners or recipients in years gone by and talk with them about how it's going today. And that's really where things become persuasive. You wouldn't be amazed because you already know, but the examples of kids who wind up prospering because they learned a skill that was in demand,
Mhm.
those are the people the country needs to hear from. And those are the people my foundation attempts to assist.
And I think the foundation for allowing us to here at the staff at DCA to help um, review some of the applications, and
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing the kids that come through and the attributes, the skills, the videos that they have to do to tell why they want this scholarship. Tell me a little bit about from what you've seen from these kids. What are some of those natural attributes that are make them truly a skilled professional? I mean, what's a good applicant?
It's hard to quantify for work ethic. It's hard to measure personal responsibility. It's hard to test for delayed gratification or somehow, um, evaluate a positive attitude. Those things are important to any employer, and in my experience anyway, an essential set of ingredients to every successful person I know. So those are the attributes that we attempt to encourage with our work ethic scholarship program. if you look at scholarship programs in general, there are thousands of them. All are well intended and many are excellent. But when we started this, we really looked around and said, okay, what's not being served? You can find all sorts of scholarships for academic achievements, and you can find many for athletic achievements, and you can find many for artistic achievements. But the business of targeting work ethic, I just didn't see anybody doing it. So our scholarship program is a work ethic scholarship program. And to your point, the application process, I wouldn't describe it as onerous, but it is a challenge. We want kids who are willing to at least try to make a case for themselves. How do you do that? You demand references, just as an employer would. And so much of what we have to evaluate are many hundreds of reference letters and reference videos from people who want to speak on behalf of the applicant. We ask applicants to make videos of themselves, to put in their own words why it is a work ethic scholarship makes sense for them. We require an essay. We require people to sign a sweat pledge, which is just a simple statement of belief I put together years ago that embodies those elements that we mentioned. So, a lot of it is really just an initial litmus test to see who's going to recoil at being asked to do these kinds of things. And Rob, you wouldn't believe it. Many do. Many look at the application process and say, why would I go through all of that? Many parents will say, why should my kid sign a sweat pledge? Stands for skills and work ethic aren't taboo, right? And the first one says, I believe I have hit the greatest lottery of all time. I'm alive. I walk the earth. Above all things, I'm grateful. You'd be surprised at how many people say, well, I don't want to sign that. Yeah. To which I say, well, then it's entirely possible that this particular pile of free money is not for you, right? And so a lot of what we try and do from a forward-facing PR standpoint is simply have a conversation and challenge a lot of the stigmas and stereotypes and myths and misperceptions that keep kids from pursuing these kinds of jobs. And we do that by forcing conversations around the very topics we're discussing today. So on the one hand, yeah, it is an attempt to quantify the unquantifiable. On the other hand, it's simply a litmus test to see who's serious about work ethic and who's not put off by it.
Yeah, the energy industry, as you know, and we've talked about this at length in the past, is desperate for workers, both contractors and in the field, for the utilities, for the different organizations that are involved in the energy industry. And it's varied. I mean, from line workers to equipment operators, electricians, welders, pipe fitters. But when you've talked about the men and women who work in some of the skilled trades in the industry, what stands out about what they value most about the work they do? What drives their passion in this industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, the only honest answer is a generalization, but I'll make one. The way it's usually posed to me is, why was everybody on Dirty Jobs having such a good time? As a group, what did the 300 people from all these disparate vocations that you featured on that program, as a group, what did they know that the rest of us either don't or have forgotten? And the honest answer to that is like a 400-page book I can't get around to finishing. But it has something to do with completion. It has something to do with the satisfaction of knowing you're moving the needle. It has something to do with the ability to look at your work site at the end of the day and see visual, optical proof that you're moving forward. I mean, you have a lovely office there, and mine's okay. And at the end of the day, the truth is, you look around our offices, they look pretty much the way they looked at the beginning of the day. We don't have a lot of visual cues as to how we're doing. If you're a lineman, you know how you're doing. If you're a sewage worker, you know how you're doing. And you can go down the list. So there's something about the constant feedback that Dirty Jobbers got on my show that made them into a sort of band of brothers. workers who understood intuitively what it meant to make a difference. They also understand, and again, I'm generalizing, but I talked to a lot of people in these vocations over the years, and they have something that I call the "It's a Wonderful Life" scenario, where they can look at the world around them and imagine what it would look like if they and all their compatriots called in sick for a week or a month, right? They understand intuitively that they're making a difference, and that goes to pride. It goes to job satisfaction, and ultimately it goes to prosperity. And this is something that my foundation's involved in a lot, and something that surprises people when I tell them. But the people we featured on Dirty Jobs, I counted them up one day and came up with 41 or 42 multimillionaires who were featured on that program. If you know the show, that will surprise most people, because optically, none of those people look like multimillionaires, but they were. And they're the examples I use today of people who prospered as a result of learning a trade initially. I can't tell you, Rob, how many steam fitters, pipe fitters, welders, electric, heating, air conditioning, plumbers, we help people get those certifications and then check back in 4 or 5 years. Yeah, sometimes you find a satisfied welder, steam fitter, pipe fitter, plumber, but oftentimes you find somebody with 2 or 3 vans and a mechanical business and half a dozen employees or more. And so the on-ramp into small businesses and entrepreneurship is my other answer to your question. It's so easy when you look at the skilled trades to dismiss the on-ramp into, a going concern, because people are kind of hardwired to look at those jobs as dead-end jobs, as very specific jobs. That's not how it works. They're rungs on ladders, and the heights to which you can climb on a skilled trade ladder, that's a big part of what we try and accentuate and remind people about what's possible.
Yeah.
It's really boundless.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. The contractors that are part of our association, most of them started, just as you said, digging ditches, putting pipe in the ground, moved up to foreman, supervisor, general manager, vice president, now president of companies, and they've grown through the ranks and through the industry, and I know that's a big deal in the energy industry across the spectrum, and one of the things that, and we talked about this the other day, was being essential. That the energy for the workforce is as essential as nurses and doctors and all those that are fighting this god awful pandemic right now.
Yep.
But without the energy industry, without the people who keep the lights on, keep the pipe in the ground, pump the gas through, turn the wind turbines and the solar and all the elements of the energy industry that keep those hospital lights on, keep the
You guys, you're fighting a multi-front war, right? I mean, if the challenge is workforce development and recruitment, then we should have a conversation about more persuasive PR and better ways to tell your own story. It's a challenge not just for the energy industry, but for every company I've ever worked with. They're fundamentally bad at telling their own story. It's just the way it is. It's very hard for organizations, associations, foundations, and corporations to get out of their own way. It just is. So that's one challenge. But you guys have this whole added patina of nonsense on top of your industry that makes it doubly hard. And that's this persistent belief that you're contributing to the demise of civilization in the next 12 years. Perhaps you've seen the headlines, Rob. Right? You guys are wrecking the world, right? Yeah. So you've got to push against a lot of different things at the same time in order to make your case. And so for me, the first time you and I talked, we discussed the enormity of that challenge and how, if you look at it from all sides, it's enough to make you want to just go back to bed and pull the covers over your head. How do you fight it? To my way of thinking, you fight it small. You don't fight it big. You fight it one success story at a time. And that's what my foundation does. MicroWorks is in the business of introducing you to guys like Michael Gamez, who got out of high school, learned, went to UTI, figured out how to work in mechanics, and now he's killing it at BMW in Beverly Hills, right? He's got a great life doing something he loves. Well, great. We helped that guy, but we can't stop there. Now our job is how to tell Michael Gamez's story.
Yeah.
And the truth is, at the risk of sounding self-interested, we should be doing the same thing with everybody on this call. You know, part of what I'd like to do this year with MicroWorks is just a very simple campaign. Call it Back to Work. And I want to talk on camera to people who have applied for and received a work ethic scholarship and done well. And then I want your companies, one of your companies, perhaps somebody listening right now, to sponsor that message in a way that allows me to pivot back and talk about the opportunities that exist in that specific company. Or we just find people right in your industry right now. And I know off the top of our head, you and I could probably come up with 500 names, but we have to tell their stories because they're going to be more persuasive than you and me combined. We have to show the country examples of people who have prospered in the energy industry as the direct result of learning a trade. We can do that. We've been doing it for 12 years. And it's not big and it's not glamorous and it's not sexy, but it moves the needle. We've seen it again and again. And you guys are in a unique position, I think, to do it.
Well, we are. And you know, you've talked about the 7 million skilled jobs that are out there. It's probably a lot more than that now. There's hundreds of thousands needed in the energy industry. You know, job security is such a big deal. And, you know, how do you address that? How do we address that? How do we make that?
Well, I mean, sorry, I didn't really answer your last question regarding essentiality, if that's a word, but that's part of it, you know, and the other thing you're fighting against, and I'm not a psychologist, but if I were one, I would suggest that we wind up so often resenting that which we depend upon. And that's the other thing you guys are fighting. You know, nobody thinks about the miracle that happens when they flip the switch and the lights come on. They only think about the frustration when they flip the switch and the lights don't come on, you know? And so this is happening in the country right now all the time. Right here across San Francisco Bay, the wildfires are still burning. Derecos are blowing through Iowa, leveling places like Cedar Rapids. Another hurricane's on its way into the Gulf. And of course, a pandemic is over top of all of it. So if you're looking for reasons to feel unsettled, there's no shortage of them. But with regard to what's essential, you got 40 million people out of work. And they're out of work because in a sort of default way, we've deemed them unessential. Now that's crazy because if we've seen anything, when we look at our economy, we see that there is no such thing as a non-essential job in the way that we're all connected. But when we look at your industry and we look at dirty jobbers, we can still see that, in fact, there is a line between the two. There are some jobs right now that we simply rely on. I mean, we couldn't have the conversation we're having right now if somebody somewhere hadn't made the connections work. Honestly, between my internet hookup and, you know, the Amazon Prime guy, I don't know where I'd be right now, you know, and I think the whole country is starting to realize that as well. And so the thing that's essential is always sort of shifting and changing on a macro level. But on a micro level, we all see ourselves as essential workers. Everybody sees themselves as essential, if for no one else, to themselves and maybe their families. So that's a long way of saying that word has really become a challenge for me because Dirty Jobs is the granddaddy of all essential working shows. But here I am at the height of a pandemic, surrounded by natural disasters, saying, I'm not so sure there's any such thing as a non-essential worker. So all of that gets pushed into the conversation that the country needs to have, along with the cost of college, along with the existence of opportunity, and along with the challenges that your companies face in a very specific way. You still have to recruit. You still have to make a persuasive case for the jobs that are open. And you have to do it in a way that doesn't feel self-interested, heavy-handed, or any of that. It's not easy, but it's doable. And I still say the key to doing that is to focus on one person at a time.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about dirty jobs, and people think of the energy industry sometimes as a dirty job, especially in our world where we're digging ditches and putting pipe in the ground, or climbing a pole and putting a line on a electrical line up there. We need people who love to work with their hands, but we also need those who work with their minds. With those with college degrees, those who prefer on the job training. The energy industry is looking for workers and welders, but also engineers and plant operators and nuclear engineers. You had an old poster from high school days that said, I think you had remade, that said, work smart, not hard. And then you changed that to work smart and hard. This industry really encompasses that idea. Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, somebody asked me once, what I thought the worst advice ever given in the history of our country was. And it was such a great question because I found myself ruminating on all of the, they call them successories, right?
Those posters.
Yeah, that conventional wisdom that's usually hanging in, some boardroom, persistence. And it's a picture of like a rowing skull with, 8 guys. Determination, it'll say. Stay the course. Well, staying the course only makes sense if you're headed in the right direction, right? So I started looking at conventional wisdom, cookie cutter advice, bromides, platitudes, tropes, those kinds of things, and realizing that they're almost always rife with unintended consequences. And so much of what passes for advice in this day and age winds up causing enormous harm because people get the advice who aren't ready to hear it. And so when somebody asked me what I thought the worst advice was, I remembered a poster that was hanging in my old guidance counselor's office back in high school, a guy named Mr. Dunbar, who had called me to his office as a senior to discuss my future and encouraged me to apply for a number of colleges, University of Pennsylvania, James Madison, University of Maryland, and so forth. And I didn't have any money. And more importantly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But the pressure to take a loan was real. And my plan was to go to a community college first, work, and then maybe circle back to a university later. Well, long story short, Mr. Dunbar points to this poster on his wall that says, work smart, not hard. And that was a part of a PR campaign for college back in the 70s. And on one side of the poster is a college graduate holding his diploma, looking optimistically toward the rising sun. And on the other side of the poster is a worker, and he's holding a wrench, and he's looking down at the ground like he's won some sort of vocational consolation prize. And you can imagine the caption, work smart, not hard. And Mr. Dunbar says, which one of these guys do you want to be? And that, I didn't realize it at the time. I mean, I knew it didn't make sense. I knew it was a loaded question, but it wasn't until years later that I realized the push for college in the 70s and 80s came at the expense of all other forms of knowledge. And that's still the case today, I'm afraid. I've got nothing bad to say about a 4-year degree. I've got one, and it served me well, to your point. Now, in 1984, mine cost a total of $12,000. Today, the exact same courses are a little north of 90 grand. So nothing in the history of our country that's of value has ever increased in cost faster than a 4-year degree. Not healthcare, not real estate, not food, not energy, nothing. And so we're just so dramatically out of whack in terms of cost that I begin to think, wait a minute, that we have to do a better job of putting all the options on the table. To answer your question, early on in MicroWorks, I remembered that old poster not long after somebody had asked me the worst advice in the world. And I said, that's the worst advice in the world. Work smart, not hard. It's a love letter to efficiency, which is different than effectiveness, right? Effectiveness is what we want. So in our quest for endless efficiency, work smart, not hard became a rallying cry. But of course, it's not how you build anything. Work smart and hard seemed a more sensible bromide. So really, just because I had enough time on my hands and a bug up my butt, I redid that poster to read work smart and hard. I literally crossed out not and wrote in and then I assumed the character on the left, the guy in the cap and gown with $80,000 in debt, a diploma, but no useful skill, standing next to a skilled worker, debt-free, making a good living, simply to challenge, right? Simply to challenge the old way of thinking. Now, the truth is, again, we shouldn't be making judgment calls on one form of education versus another. But it is fair to look at the cost of a thing. And it is fair, I think, to look at where the real opportunities lie. And I think it's incumbent on us to challenge guidance counselors and parents and kids to give themselves an honest look at the opportunities that truly exist. I did, just a quick aside, a commencement speech this year. A lot of trade schools asked me to come and talk, and because of the pandemic and a lot of other reasons, I couldn't. So I did something online. And in the course of that speech, I introduced 3 work ethic scholarship recipients from years gone by. And I put them up just to make a really simple point. And one of the people we featured was a welder named Chloe, who was in her mid-20s, who wanted to become a doctor, wanted to practice plastic surgery, balked at the last minute at the $250,000 price tag, decided to become a welder. Chloe, with her fake eyelashes and beautiful skin and glamorous je ne sais quoi, hops on this video. She's one of the most prized welders at a nuclear power facility up in New England. She's making mid-6 figures. She's killing it. She's debt-free. And she looks not like what you would expect, but exactly who we need to find in order to make the kind of case I want to make for working smart and hard. So that's what we're doing. And you're right. I hadn't thought about that poster in a long time, but it was some seriously crappy advice. I'm glad I didn't take it.
Well, I know there's a lot of people out there in the audience that are working smart and hard. We have veterans, students, minorities. We have women, everything, looking to the energy career, looking to see what opportunities there are. Today, there's a lot of presentations and speeches and talking a lot about the opportunities that are in the energy industry.
Yep.
So I appreciate your time today and giving us a little bit about the skilled workforce and your impact on it, which has been tremendous. Anything else about the foundation? You told us a lot, but anything else you want to share about that?
Well, I mean, I want to thank you. I don't know if the audience is familiar with it, but you and I had a conversation well over a year ago about alternative ways to show the country that energy is not the enemy, right? For a lot of people, that's where you really have to start. And we talked about, a show that doesn't really hit energy right squarely on the head, but shows how energy connects us in so many surprising ways. That show is called 6 Degrees. As you know, there's a poster for it back there. That thing's going to be out there in the next couple of months. It's going to be on Discovery. And, DCA played a role in helping get that thing off of the ground. And so we're going to be able to put messages in that show that reinforce the basic idea that we're all connected by work, and more to the point that we're all connected by energy. So, a simple conversation that you and I had over some sensible bourbon once upon a time has now turned into a full-on 6-hour series, a love letter to history and biography and work. And I'm proud of it. And I think people are going to like it, and getting out there and explaining, how DCA and API and, other people helped us do this. That's part of the conversation too.
I can't wait to see it. I've seen some rough cuts of it. It looks fantastic as always.
It's a blast.
So in closing, Mike, thank you so much to the audience out there. There are a lot of cool careers out here in the energy industry, and I know firsthand we have a lot of them in the contractor field. And I hope you hear something today about energy careers, and that'll help change your future and change your life. And as Mike has said, there's golden opportunities and lots of money. It's a well-paying career, and it's a career. It's one that changes your life for the long term. It's essential to America. It's essential to keeping our lights on and the power going, and it's fun. It's a great career. The cool thing about it is it helps you change your community. It lets you give back to your community and to the country, and to rebuild the infrastructure that desperately needs rebuilding, and to keep the power, keep the lights on. So I know that there's you'll see a lot today. There's a go to energy or getintoenergy.com has a lot more information. But Mike, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and thank you. Can't thank you enough.
Privilege. It's great to be here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Be well. Thanks, guys.